Thank you, everyone, Mary, Nathan, and Catherine, for that overly generous introduction. Thank you for bringing me here. This is a real honor. And this is kind of full circle for me because my very first talk as a grad student was at this conference, and I didn't want to do it. As grad students, I'm not ready, no. And Catherine's like, you're going on first day, right after the keynote. It'll be great because everyone will be in the room, and don't embarrass me. And so, that's what happened, and so this is full circle. This is a really nice return to Madison for me. So I will just jump into our talk. I'm going to talk about basically what I call desire of the object. And what I want to talk about, I'm going to enter this topic by talking about what I see as shifting sensibilities regarding spirit beliefs in Thailand, as middle-class propitiates adapt their understanding of the spirit world and their place in it. And then I wanted to discuss how people maneuver within this landscape of spirit beliefs and desire. And I think a good place to start is with the discussion of shifting attitudes that we can see in language itself. The term P in Thai contains a multiplicity of meaning. It can refer to the monstrous, ghouls and ghosts, as well as animistic spirits, or what we call non-empirical entities. The first meaning, the monstrous, belongs to the genre the ghost story or the horror film, of which Thai cultural productions excel. The second, more traditional meaning is rooted in spiritual beliefs and practices that anthropologists call animism, or the worldview in which all life forms share a common interiority or personhood. This overlapping meaning seems to be long-standing according to the historical evidence I have seen. But the secondary reference to naturalistic spirit beings is fading over time. The remnants of this we can see in words like pifa or telpi. However, the more common understanding is the separation of the monstrous P and spirits that are worthy of propitiation, tutelary spirits, which are now te or tewada. There is this bifurcation of meaning that you see, I think, as a representation of bourgeois aesthetics. Put another way, spirits that people routinely propitiate, such as tree spirits, child spirits, spirits of the household, spirits of the place, may have been called P in the past, and people most commonly would not refer to those benevolent type of spirits as P now. Another clear example, Catherine mentioned my fixation on baby ghosts. One clear example, the contemporary bourgeois-influenced trend to differentiate beneficial tutelary spirits from malevolent P is the practice of propitiating child spirits. While the practice of propitiating spirits of fetuses, infants, and small children is long-standing, the current middle-class fascination with adopting child spirits as companions and helpmates reflects this shift. Propitiates continue to visit shrines that hold preserved bodies of fetuses and small children, Wat Padu, Wat Mahabut, for example, in Bangkok. There is a palpable unease with the public attention on such practices. In place of preserved human remains, propitiates obtain figurines, including lifelike angel dolls or lupte, to house such spirits. The illicit traffic, I don't have a picture. My picture that I had wasn't good, so I'm sorry, I don't have that picture. The illicit traffic in these human remains is fodder for the tabloid press and generally held to be immoral. People who adopt child spirits are more likely to understand these spirits as te than as P. And I've talked about child spirits many times over the years, so I won't dwell on it here, but I just wanted to introduce this belief as an idea where we can clearly see the shifting sensibility. And I remember right after a story came out in the Thai tabloid press about some preserved fetuses that had been confiscated by the police. They were being trafficked to Taiwan. And I went to Wat Mahabut because there's a very famous baby I think, child spirit shrine there, and I was asking the vendors if they knew where it was. It's a huge complex, and they said, no, there's no Gumantong, there's no child spirit here. And there was, but I think it reflected this unease, it was an unseemly practice. And this is an example from Wat Padu in Bangkok. You can see the preserved human remains or objects at a spirit shrine that is still very well visited, but it can create a sense of unease and distaste within bourgeois aesthetics. What I want to talk about for the remainder of the paper is hell parks. Another example of this trend to cleanse representations of spirits is found in the braid, figures found in hell parks. These hell parks are sculpture gardens found in Buddhist temples. These parks have life-size statues of braid, showing the karmic punishments for misdeeds in life. While braid, or those spirits suffering in the afterlife, or maybe more properly the between life, they're suffering these punishments as a consequence of their misdeeds. And they're almost always historically represented as naked in the past. These new upscale, this is Wat Muang in Ang Thong province, and that's I'm blanking out. I'll get it later. That's the more traditional park, and you can see the difference. The newer parks will have the figures as clothed. And I asked some of the monks and the officials at this park, why are the figures closed? And they said, it's more appropriate for family-friendly viewing. Okay. So the move away from associations of death and nudity or explicit sexuality, bodily grotesqueness, or connections with superstition or lowbrow entertainment is an aspect of middle-class sensibility transnationally. These features are more properly part of the horror film or body horror, which is also popular in Thai media. We can see aspects of this respectability aesthetics in these subtle shifts in imagery and language. Another important adaptation to middle-class sensibility and capitalist transformation is the so-called Buddha business, or Buddha Panit. This commodification and commercialization of Buddhist practices has been well analyzed and documented by many others, including Ajahn Patana, who says, quote, engined by the large-scale merit-making industry, the prosperity cult of Buddha Panit represents a religio-cultural space where popular Buddhism has converged with market economy, consumers' practices, and the quest for personal and cultural identity, end quote. There are numerous examples of Buddhist spaces dedicated to spirit cults and aggressive merit-making activities. And this is a temple in the Khonsi Tamarat, Wat Tegi. The embrace of spiritual commodities, the capitalist marketplace, and middle-class respectability aesthetics does not, however, erode the effective and meaningful interaction with these spiritual practices and locations. While capitalism can be rightfully understood as a force of domination, control, and impoverishment, I want to focus on the ways in which people can meaningfully maneuver within this context. There are spiritual opportunities and meanings that can evolve within this context as well. So I want to talk about the concept of desire. This is the theory section. This is dedicated to Catherine. The concept of desire is a way of exploring the connection between spiritual practices and capitalism. Capitalism is an economy of commodity production, of course, but it is also an economy of desire production, and I would argue that is probably the first and foremost function of capitalism. So let's think about how desire production relates to hell parks. Hell parks and the manner in which visitors interact with the images on display illustrate W.J.T. Mitchell's theory of double consciousness. Mitchell claims that the human psyche tends to move between iconoclastic critique, defined as a suspicion of the power of images to promote ideological manipulation, and an inclination to imbue images with animistic, anthropomorphic, lifelike qualities. Mitchell explains that human minds move between iconoclasm, in which the iconoclastic perspective dismisses the tendency to see life in inanimate objects as magical thinking, that is idolatry, and the uncanny feeling that objects have been alive all along. In other words, quote, hard-headed, critical, and skeptical position, which we claim as our own, contrasts with the derogatorily labeled tendency to be superstitious, mystical, or naive, which we frame as representative of the thought of the other. For Mitchell, the human psyche vacillates between the poles of belief and disavowal. allowing us to both cynically disavow the human practice of imbuing objects with a life force as a magical, naive belief of the other, and to be drawn to our innate sense of the uncanny, or the moment when the most ordinary forms of disavowed superstitions, monsters in the closet, toys coming alive, come back as undeniable truth. As adults, we all know that objects are not literally alive, although what stands as alive can be questioned. We act as if images or objects have a kind of personhood, subjectivity, or animating force. Mitchell's concept of double consciousness compels us to understand that the practice of imbuing objects with lifelike qualities is not some primitive residue of pre-scientific thought, but an important, if disavowed, human mode of interacting with the world. Mitchell makes the further connection that as imagined living beings, images must therefore have desire, in the Lacanian sense that desire marks the space of lack in the socialized human being, or the subject. For Lacan, it is the lack that we are compelled to fill that gives us life force. The force that propels us to move forward in life in search of fulfillment, that is desire. Mitchell argues that we make a new insight into the working of images if we see what happens if we question pictures or images about their desire instead of looking at them as vehicles of meaning or instruments of power. According to Mitchell, academic analysis of images has largely focused on decoding the latent political message within the images to reveal the inherent ideological power structures the images are designed to promote. While analyzing the ideological power of an object is an important dimension of our understanding of how images work and the political effects they have, Mitchell urges us to also ask, what do pictures want? I think that's the title of this book. Which in Lacanian terminology is a way of asking, what do pictures desire? Mitchell admits that he does not have a specific methodology for determining what pictures want. Rather, he highlights that we as humans act as if images and objects have a kind of personhood or subjectivity that entails desire, a lack, a need, a request, a want. While Mitchell's project is admittedly abstract, his question provides a new perspective from which to explore locations of concentrated affect and emotion, such as in the Thai health parks. And as a side note, we all know Marx, of course, talked about commodity fetishism, or the sense of life within the commodity. But I think it's important to note, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this sense of life within the commodity for Marx is a mystification. It hides the true nature of the life worth, which is labor value, and the social relationships that led to the production of the object. So in a sense, the life force of the commodity for Marx is a lie. Do you agree? Okay. So what I think that is a useful way to look at the life force of commodities, but it doesn't cover all the ways that we understand the life force of the object. In particular, this call to question the desire of the object helps us understand the dual functioning of the park. While Buddhist pedagogical messages are on full display, these are the misdeeds and these are the consequences. These are the consequences, and the laws of karma and rebirth and so forth are evident in these sculptures. But more is going on here than just a lesson in Buddhist ethics, morality, or ideology. Visitors to the park act as if certain statues of hell beings and suffering souls have an animating spark of life, and hence desire. As animated entities, their ideological message recedes, and they are transformed into beings with needs and desires capable of social interaction with humans. So if the life force is distinguished by lack, and humans imbue images with a life force, Mitchell asks, what do pictures lack? In other words, if images are thought of as if they have a life force and subjecthood, then they too must be structured by lack and desire. Strikingly, visitors to the Hell Park recognize the lack in particular images. in particular images, which in turn brings these images vividly to life. Specifically, visitors have identified at least 2 of these bright images in the Hell Park at Wat Pai Rong Wa as embodied spiritual entities that desire recognition and devotion. The way visitors interact with and interpret the Hell Park demonstrates how Hell Parks provide more than a lesson in Buddhist ethics. Hell Parks are a site of creative innovation in which ideological messages are discarded in favor of a more personal, viscerally felt religiosity. The graphically illustrated bodily torture is intended to excite interest in Buddhist ethics and morality, playing upon the human ability to know intellectually that images are lifeless projections of a cosmological fantasy of the afterlife, and simultaneously sense that life exists within these images. Visitors know that these images are not literally alive, yet they feel they are. The Hell Parks are an attempt to evoke strong feelings through images of the tortured body and link these feelings to an ideological message, and thus compel visitors to enact merit-making rituals. Merit-making is a central method by which Buddhist institutions gain financial support from lay people. Yet visitors to these parks have the uncanny ability to flip ideological messages with counter-readings, a practice that can be referred to as querying the message. Specifically, some of these hell beings are reinterpreted as benevolent spiritual powers. In addition to merit-making that conforms to normative Buddhist expectations, followers may also enact Gabon rituals that form personal relationships with the re-envisioned spirits, a quid pro quo interaction for mutual benefit of both spirit and visitor. In this inversion of the park's ostensible intended messaging, visitors find the life and desire within these images. The diversity and malleability of spirit practices, beliefs, and evolving traditions challenge institutional Buddhist hierarchy in subtle yet important ways. And I visited 5 different hell parks in the course of this research, and here's just sort of this is an example of the different vibes. Dark and dingy, kind of crude but graphic, a little prettier and fancier. This is, they each have their own kind of aesthetic going on. Each park has its own particular aesthetic, from damp, gloomy caverns of Wangsan, Zunkanchonburi, to the brightly painted sculpture gardens and elaborate temple grounds of Wat Muang in Antong province. Some of the temples are large, clearly well-financed, flashy tourist and pilgrimage sites. Others are small, remote sites with few visitors from outside the local community. All the parks share in an ostensibly pedagogical project of visually representing the moral universe of cause and effect, karma, that is at the heart of Buddhist cosmology. I say ostensibly because I feel there's an effective project work here that is arguably more significant than the rational moral universe that is on display. The apparent ideological message of the parks provides a thin veneer of respectable Buddhist pedagogy over the more dynamic, personal, viscerally experienced spirituality. The hell parks no doubt carry powerful ideological messages about Buddhist cosmology, ethics, and social meaning. While these meanings may not be as straightforward as one might expect, ideology is an important part of the park's functioning. The hell parks all have at least some reference to core Buddhist teachings about the landscape of hell, hell beings, hell ruler, karma, rebirth, and prey. These elements of Thai Buddhism are not esoteric philosophical teachings. They're often used as central plot devices in Thai entertainment and popular culture, for example. So just to talk about braid specifically here. The most iconic braid is this, where was it? I just need to go. I want to go.
Oh, there it is.
Whoops.
It went
It's
all
just
the way.
back.
Is the spirit taking control?
The most iconic braid is enormously tall and insatiably hungry, with a pinhole for a mouth. Braids of this category are horrifically thin, and their hunger can never be satisfied because of their small mouth. This braid is prominently rendered as the centerpiece of each hell park, including the one at Wat Pai Rongwa. Misdeeds that lead to rebirth as brave include envying the rich, despising the poor, criticizing one's monk teachers, giving medicine to a woman to induce abortion, cursing husbands for making alms to monks, cheating customers, beating parents, refusing beggars, not admitting to stealing, hunting illegally, taking bribes while a judge, giving inferior or improper food such as dog meat to monks, lying to monks and holy men, making false accusation and bullying the poor and helpless. The hell parks provide a near endless list of oddly specific misdeeds. For instance, hunting turtles on, okay, let's see, boom, boom, boom. Let's see, hunting turtles on temple grounds and their punishment, becoming a monstrous turtle braid. Most of the transgressions represented are minor social infractions, such as disrespecting parents, smoking marijuana, or nagging one's husband. Each transgression is linked to a particular punishment, framed as a form of karmic justice. That punishment is directly caused by the transgression and returns the suffering of the transgression manyfold. For example, the misdeed of deceiving women, the figure is impaled on spikes while being disemboweled by a raven. Some punishments more directly mirror the precise misdeed. Misdeed of hitting one's parents results in being burdened with grotesquely enlarged hands. In walking through Wat Pai Rongwa, looking at these sculptures, which have been faded and bleached by the sun, the crude human figures, naked and distorted, signify the cause and effect dynamic at the heart of the concept of karma. The figures are naked with crudely depicted genitalia. The naked, crude bodies are undignified in their suffering, and their humiliation is certainly a central element of their punishment. These specific descriptions, such as being naked and generally disgusting, are consistent with descriptions of Braid in the Dry Poem in the original Pali text, the Peta Batu, or Peta stories. The lack of human expression on these figures distances the viewer who might feel compassion or sympathy for their suffering, regardless of their misdeeds. The images of both Braid and their torturers lack individual or personal qualities. They are largely interchangeable except for the specific punishment inflicted on the Braid. While meditation of the tortured existence of Braid may elicit compassion and sympathy as a general Buddhist doctrine, the crude figures on display are unlikely to elicit such a feeling. Buddhist temples in Thailand typically provide various opportunities for merit-making, either through impressive Buddhist sculptures or shrines to individual spiritual entities. The display of pathetic Braid also is designed to elicit ritualistic merit-making. Merit-making is the practice of providing for the monkhood through donation of food or other gifts to the temple, or doing a good deed in a more general sense for the benefit of those who are suffering and in need. Through these acts of giving, the giver accumulates merit or has meritorious karma, and this merit is also in some abstract sense transformed to others. So I won't spend any more time on merit-making because I think many people understand it in this room. The stories of Braid in Buddhist texts, the Peta Batu or the Dry Poem, were centrally aimed at promoting merit-making and almsgiving. Braid appeared to be living in Braid appear to followers, they appear in dreams or visions as pathetic beings wandering the earth in search of assistance from the living. And when I interviewed people about ghost stories, seeing Braid was the most common ghost story they told. The typical response to the vision of a Braid is to make merit for that wandering spirit. Jeffrey Shirky, in his monumental study of the Peta stories, notes that an essential preoccupation for Buddhists was, and still remains, a concern with caring for the dead, hungry ghosts. Shirky argues that the stories of the Braid in Buddhist tradition are centrally connected to merit-making, and these stories cannot be approached without understanding their importance to this practice. In other words, the whole point of discussing in grotesque detail the suffering of Braid in Buddhist texts is to emphasize the importance of merit-making to followers of Buddhism, according to Shirky. The scene of dozens of suffering great in the hell parks, therefore, is not only a morality lesson in forbidden activities, but a lesson in Buddhist approaches to caring for the dead. While the stale plaster figures in the hell park, for the most part, evoke little effective change, anonymous visitors have identified two unusual images in the park as having a kind of subjecthood, and therefore desire, that the other images lack. Two large, green, monstrous, bright figures with bulging eyes are covered in clothing and garlands befitting a spiritual image. These figures have been identified by visitors as worthy of veneration as benevolent tutelary spiritual beings. Both of these figures are aesthetically different from the other bright images in the park. They have a non-human, somewhat monstrous look to them. The female figure has a tongue sticking out, and the male figure wears a fierce grimace. But unlike the other bright, these two images are covered in this decorative clothing as if they were spiritual beings like Jiao Ma or Jiao Pa, names for revered tutelary spirits. These spirits are not part of the tableau of misdeeds and punishment meted out by the Hell Guardians. In The Fate of World Hell, Benedict Anderson, who has noted their existence in his book on this particular hell park, explains that one of the sculptors reported that he made these sculptures after comic book characters, and so their appearance differs from the white plaster human-like forms of the other statues. The exact function of these images is unclear. As comic book figures of hellish monsters, they do not fit any clear referent for hell beings, demon or great, in the description of hell plains in the Dreipung, or in the popular image of great elsewhere. The female figure is of particular significance. One of the surviving sculpture monks told Anderson how, at the abbot's orders, he carved a large green braid of a woman with huge genitals to emphasize her licentious nature. In a striking reversal of meaning, Anderson reports that people came to the statue to be cured and to touch her genitalia for their magical healing powers. The transformation of these two green monstrous figures in a sea of grotesquely distorted human figures into objects of devotion decorated beautifully with garlands and colorful sashes is a striking repurposing of images. A visitor gazing at the dozens of images of tortured beings would be hard-pressed to find an uplifting message or a scene of hopeful possibility within the park, aside from the location of donation boxes for merit making. And yet, just such a scene of hopeful possibility has been created, a collective act of cruel optimism. Queer theorist Lauren Berlant introduced the concept of cruel optimism to identify in the contemporary neoliberal cultural practice of promoting discourses of hope and possibility in spite of their near impossibility of the positive outcomes. Mary Ruti explains cruel optimism thusly. Precisely because optimistic attachments can feel life-sustaining even as they cause pain, because they provide the kinds of fantasies of flourishing that allow injured subjects to keep on living despite the obstacles they face, it would be misleading to interpret them as a mistake. In a field of beings tortured for the sins of living, visitors to the Hell Park have wrested a benevolent source of spiritual assistance, transforming Brait from a helpless, suffering spirit into a powerful source of spiritual benevolence, and therefore a hopeful avenue of fulfilling one's desires. These visitors, or defiant subjects, as Ruti might refer to them, in place of desiring to be good subjects who adhere to the rules laid out so bluntly, ask for worldly blessings at this makeshift shrine, channeling their desire for worldly wealth, success, and all the things held by these propitiates to make the good life. In a sense, by creating a site for expression of worldly desires, these visitors are defying the ideological message of the Hell Park seeks to foster, with their images of an afterlife or between life, full of ghostly presence of Brait and their suffering. The imagery of the Brait in the Hell Park is designed to construct what Deborah Gould calls an emotional habitus that is consistent with Buddhist ideology. Affect and emotion have a social dimension, and Gould's use of the concept of emotional habitus captures a process in which social members are schooled in an emotional disposition, or emotional pedagogy. An emotional habitus consists of a template for what and how to feel, in part by conferring on some feelings and modes of expression the axiomatic natural quality of making other feeling states unintelligible within its term, and thus a sense unfeelable and inexpressible. For instance, not this one, this one. For instance, the tableau of Yamaban and the dispensation of justice anchors the viewer to a knowable scene, evoking the righteousness of Buddhist morality based on karmic laws as impersonally and objectively guiding our journey through worldly existence and beyond. In this way, the Hell Park scenes connect a feeling with a particular sociocultural message rooted in Thai Buddhist cosmology. The symbolic and moral structure of the message allows for the pulse of creativity to transform the cartoon ghouls into spiritual entities that address visitors' emotional and spiritual needs. The meaning, one of hopeful possibility through spiritual intercession on visitors' behalf. This transformation also highlights the ability of people who might be marginalized in terms of formal institutional power to creatively engage with the spirit world in ways that center their own needs, feelings, and experiences. With its vivid scenes of torture and suffering, the Hell Park functions on an affective and emotional level. The scenes of horror are titillating, even attractive, in that they draw the visitor in for closer inspection. The need for temples to attract visitors and merit-making activities to generate financial support explains the obvious reason for these parks to exist. They are an attraction, and the thousands of temples throughout Thailand compete for visitors by advertising particular shrines or attractions that they offer. Each shrine, including the Hell Parks, can be explained as part of Buddhist spiritual message and belief systems that ultimately encourages merit-making activities. Yet, how people experience these places is on a different register that cannot be easily communicated. Perhaps the popularity and presumed pleasure of visiting these carefully scripted scenes of divine punishment rest on what Anne Pellegrini calls the queering of the message, a kind of counter-reading of the ostensible pedagogical function of the display. Ironically, Pellegrini notes, to frighten people away from a sin, the sin must be portrayed in a convincing manner. Sin is inherently attractive. Sin is lush, sensual, readily theatrical. By comparison, goodness is generic, saccharine, and bland. All right, this is a good one.
Yep.
As a side note, the fancy Wat Muang Hell Park also has a Heaven Park. And I am going to go out on a limb and say the Heaven Park is not the attraction. Queer readings arise when the images, through their very emotive and sensory-stimulating imagery, can evoke precisely the thing that is repudiated. Similarly, in most of the Thai Hell Parks, sexual misdeeds, such as adultery, are displayed in violent and graphic ways, with vividly rendered genitalia often grotesquely mutilated. Even in representations of misdeeds that are not sexual, the images have graphically rendered genitalia. Bodies of the suffering are rarely clothed, and clearly rendered genitalia of the figures is particularly striking because in the artistic tradition of Thai classical art, it generally does not include realistic nude human forms. In Hell Parks, the almost sadistic overpunishment for mundane deeds undercuts the park's purported aim to instill an ideological or moral lesson. In spite of the image of the Hell Park ruler and its rational dispensation of justice, the punishments in the park seem absurdly severe, beyond reason, and outside the functioning of the symbolic order. While the punishments typically reflect the nature of the misdeed in some measure, the punishments seem wildly out of scale with the offense. The nakedness of the figures and their distinct yet crude genitals add to the sense of sadistic pleasure by imagining torture and sexual humiliation rather than just a measured consequence of a misdeed. Benedict Anderson called the sexualized images anarchic, semi-sadistic eroticism. What creates pleasure in a hellscape may be the presence of desire, the life force that drives human action. Heaven, in its satisfaction of all desire, is ironically the death of the subject. To achieve absolute fulfillment of desire is to extinguish all distinction, differentiation, and self in a blistering moment of jouissance, or absolute pleasure, so that desire, and therefore the subject, is snuffed out. Desire, therefore, must imply a lack. The representation of desire, that is the necessary condition of a meaningful human life, is ironically best depicted as hell, in which hell equals life and heaven equals death. For it is only in hell that jouissance, or ultimate fulfillment, is held beyond reach. In conclusion, I've talked about the emotional reinterpretation of ideological message, queering the message, and the human tendency to ascribe lifelike qualities to emotionally invested material objects. To return to the role of the market economy, mass commodity production may provide the rich variety of material objects that are imbued with desire that bring about spiritual connections. We've talked about sort of the bourgeoisification of aesthetics, renouncing the bodily artifacts, commercialization of spiritual practices, mass production of commodity spiritual objects. These undoubtedly are happening, but yet they cannot contain or mediate all relationships to the object. This reading of the desire of the object can be unruly and spontaneous. This desire of the object cannot be reduced merely to a mystification of the commodity, to capitalist needs, but also maybe is compatible with this commodity production. Of course, I fear the effects of capitalism and the market economy for so many reasons, but the erosion of spiritual possibilities is not one of them. Thank you.